Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Shiz Who, your top spot for politics. My role in bringing great content on current events requires your role as a great viewer. So, like this video, subscribe to the Shiz Who channel, and comment on this video too. And let's shout out that which gets the show going here, starting with Mr. Farley Perkins over at the Farley Perkins Agency. Let me get to that overlay in just 1 second. Hit up 757-271-6655 because he'll help you with your needed insurance issues in the Tidewater region. If you're feeling a need for sweets like shakes, ice cream, and such, head on over to ELG Sweet Boutique, which is on High Street in Portsmouth, Virginia. Of course, if you want some good Southern-based food, my good friend Miss Ellen at Ellen's Homestyle and Barbecue Express, with 2 locations, one in Virginia Beach, one in Portsmouth, will help you out with that. Good friend Mr. Seiko Varner does Positive Vibes Incorporated, a great business to help with financial issues. Also a great entertainment source, as he's a great DJ, and he created the Hampton Roads Green Book, which is a great application to find Black-owned businesses in Hampton Roads. So, Black Swan Mindset, part of the Chronicles, which is a subdivision here on Shiz Who for great topics as well. So look that up. It's hosted by my great wife, Andrea Dixon Chesventer, and stay tuned for those as well. So this is a morning-based show, and Shiz Who is going to bring on Stephen Miller Pitts. Stephen Miller Pitts is a combat veteran. He's a military spouse, a father, an educator, a service-disabled small business owner, and he's a community activist. He has a master's in public administration from Regent University and a bachelor's in poli-sci from Chaminade, famously the university which created the biggest upset in college basketball history, beating Ralph Sampson and Virginia in the early 80s. He's a prolific help to both the Chesterfield and the Virginia NAACP. So let's bring the Virginia State University adjunct professor in American state and local politics on the show right about now. Mr. Stephen Miller Pitts, how are you today, sir?
Hey, how's it going? Good morning, comrade. How's it going? Thanks for having me on Shiz Who. I'm grateful to be a guest this morning and excited about our conversation.
Thank you so much for joining me, and we get to talk a little bit about District 75, your campaign, and the like. I want to start off with some easy things. I'm talking like businesses, organizations, recreation stuff in the greater Richmond area, Chesterfield, Hopewell, and Prince George. What are your favorite businesses and organizations and stuff that you like about that area?
Yeah, absolutely. So, this time around, because I'm a military veteran and I've been stationed in Virginia a couple times, and the second time around, me and my spouse, she got orders to Fort Gregg Adams, which is now going back to Fort Lee, if you pay attention to the news. And so my first time coming to Virginia was in AIT in 2001, Fort Lee. And so I have a breadth of knowledge of the growth and expansion of the immediate area, and viewing it through my lens of my military travels. And so, some of my favorite businesses, there's a local restaurant in the Chester area called Caesars. It's went through a couple ownership changes, but the legacy of the business is a pizza shop. And when my wife was pregnant with our youngest son, that was her craving. So I would have to go get large cheese pizzas from Caesars locally. And all the kids love that. And so that's kind of our go-to place locally. I'm a member of the Chesterfield County NAACP. I'm a member of the NPAC. I'm a member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. And so a lot of the civic organizations in Chesterfield County and Richmond, Richmond Metro has a great NPAC council with all the D9 organizations. And so a lot of my service is through that done through that lens of those type of organizations. But there's so many plethora of organizations that even the local, the PTA, that my wife participates in, because our children are student athletes, and so we try to make sure we participate in Chesterfield County Public Schools as parents. And so there's a plethora of different things. I love I love a good boil bag. And so Ocean Crab House in Chesterfield County is one of those local establishments that I love to go to. But it's a plethora when we talk about soul food. I can go up and down the list, right? And there's a bunch of different type of businesses and organizations that I love to frequent. I love to shop local. I love to use local businesses and not chains for the most part. So that's kind of how we live in the Miller Pitts household.
Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. I'm also curious, what do you enjoy most about teaching government to youngsters at Virginia State University?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And my journey to becoming a professor was kind of unorthodox. Like I said, I'm a military veteran. So at one point, I had more combat tour months than I had college credits. I deployed 3 times, twice to Iraq and once to Afghanistan. Actually, this month, June 20 years ago, me and my unit were on the way back on a plane coming back to Fort Irwin, California from a year-long deployment in Iraq 20 years ago. So it's a special time period. We're actually having a reunion in Vegas in the beginning of July. I'm going to try to make it out 20 years since my first deployment as a young whippersnapper, seeing all those things. Um, and so when I look at teaching in the military, I taught soldiers too. If you know anything about Fort Greg Adams or Fort Lee, however you want to reference it, it's a training installation. I mean, they
Mhm.
train a lot of the different the support services for the military, and then food service has all of the branches that kind of get trained at Fort Lee, right? So it's a multi branch training compound. And so I train soldiers in different specialties. And so I've always had the teaching model within me. And so I wanted to be a professor, but I just didn't want to do all that schooling. But now I got it out the way, right? And so I got my master's at Regent. And I was at a political event, and the good Dr. Wes Bellamy is my good friend. He
Charlottesville.
is, yes, he is the chair of the political science department. And we were at when Congresswoman McClellan was announcing and running for Congress in that special election. We were at a campaign event, and I was like, well, let me just ask him what's the best way for me to get into teaching, right? And I wanted to go get my doctorate, and I wanted my doctorate to be from HBCU because my other degrees are from PWIs, if you will, right? And so I wanted to teach at a HBCU and get one of my degrees from HBCU. So I was trying to see if they were going to do a doctorate. And so in our conversation, he was like, "You got your master's?" I was like, "Yeah, I got my master's." He's like, "You want to teach?" I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "You sure?" I'm about to email you the next day. And so the next day, I did all the paperwork, and then I started teaching in January 2023. I love teaching government. I'm a poli sci major, right? My Chaminade degree was political science and historical studies, right? So it's kind of merged with history too. So I'm like a history buff also. And so understanding the mindset and the framework of the initial people that put like our constitution together, how they even got to that point and what we're supposed to be doing with good intentions as citizens and participants in society is really like the bread and butter of the base of how I teach. But I love um, connecting and being relatable. And that's one thing I learned about the Gen Z population. Like you have to be relatable to them for them to
Mhm.
get it. So I teach from a unpractical standpoint, I like to call it, because I break it down to the lowest level. So if we're talking about, for instance, in case in point, a lot of people don't understand what federalism is, but they should, because a lot of stuff that we're going on right now, we're going to have to really have a deep understanding of federalism, right? And it's just basically the different governments being they operate right with autonomy, and now we're kind of seeing stuff being bleed into each other, and so really need to kind of get educated on that. But the case in point, the example I use, because hey, I know Gen Zers and I know some of the things they're into, right? So I talk about I ask a serious question like how many people in the class smoke marijuana, obviously, right? And
Yeah.
so you'll see people go, their hands will go up. But see, I'm a teacher through and through, right? So I'll say, hey, how many people smoke? And I'm like, this is safe space, whatever, whatever, right? So we having a conversation. I say, well, federally speaking, right, you can't go on Fort Greg Adams with any marijuana because there's a federal installation and it's federally it's illegal, right? And they're like, yeah, they get that part, right? And I'm like, all right, that's the federal government. Now the statewide, you can, what's the state laws, right? And so then I'm like, statewide, you can do it recreationally, right? You can have up to 4 plants, this, that, and the third, correct? And so that's the example I use because it's something that they're familiar with, their friends are into. Some of them participate, some of them don't participate, but they understand the difference between the federal level and how you can operate, and the state level how you can operate. But then I'll tie it all together, and then I'm like, but you do know. And then I ask them, how many people in here is over 21? And then hands will go down, and I'm like, well, you're wrong. So it's still illegal if you're not 21 and up, right? And so I
Mhm.
tie it all together so they understand like the law, federalism, and then really how to navigate with real life and real life examples, and then use the terminology to really understand how the government operates.
I really appreciate that as a fellow fan of government and poli sci studier, that you're able to break it down in such a way. I'm also curious because you have a rather extensive military history. And to my understanding, you were beginning basic training before 9/11. And of course, you had a big career after 9/11. I'm curious if you could break down the two relative visions you had of your role in the military and such prior to that Tuesday morning and what you thought by that Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think individuals enter the military for various different reasons. And so my reason was, growing up, I didn't know that we were really poor. We moved from, I'm from New Jersey. And then I got a story about that because you asked me about hobbies. And ancestry is one of my big hobbies, and really understand where I come from. And I recognize that my people do come. My third great grandfather comes from Suffolk County. He was enslaved, and then they migrated to Gates County, which is like 30 minutes in North Carolina, and then they migrated north after that, right, when all the enslaved Africans were freed and everything. And so we ended up in Jersey. And so one of the things I recognized growing up, used to look up to my cousins, but I recognized as they graduated high school or didn't graduate high school, that they really wasn't getting into much. And so I was like, I needed to figure out my pathway. And I kind of was over school. But I didn't know that we didn't have health insurance. And so my senior year of high school, my brother had got sick. We thought it was a common cold. My parents were divorced for a while at that time. My mom called my dad because the last doctor that we had was our pediatrician. Here we are, my brother's 14, I'm 17 years old. And I'm 18 actually. And so my dad took my brother to the pediatrician, the last doctor that we actually went to, right? So this is kind of when I figured out we didn't have health insurance. This is when I kind of realized we didn't have a lot going on. But unfortunately, they misdiagnosed my brother with a common cold, and he passed away that Sunday with meningitis. And so from that, I really wanted to leave New Jersey. So I joined the military. I joined the military, and I joined in 2001. And so I was in basic training. I was on the tail end of basic training. We actually were at our field training exercise. It's like the culmination, one of the culmination points of basic training where you go out into the field and you do different exercises, lanes, and so on and so forth. I remember this day vividly because I really went to the military to get some discipline, to get out of Jersey, and then figure out funding for college when I eventually decided to go to college. And so it was the morning time. We had slept in our the trenches, the foxholes that we dug. So we slept in that all night, very uncomfortable, bugs, this, that, and the third. And one of my battle buddies had went to sick call. He went to the doctor. Sick call is the doctor. And so in the field we didn't have anything. So when he came back from sick call, he was like, "They're attacking us, right?" And so we're in the field at this point. And he's like, "They're attacking us. I seen it on the TVs, this, that, and the third. Like we're under attack." And nobody really knew what was going on. And all the drill sergeants, they had us pack up. We had a little a meeting. We packed up everything and we went back, and then we had to do roving guard. We did roving guard as basic training because we really didn't know what was going on. And so what the drill sergeants had us do was do roving guard, and we did roving guard with like dummy weapons, which is something like. But I think it was to get us in the mindset of like this is real. Like we're soldiers and we have a mission first, right? And then everything else that we might have joined the military for is an afterthought until you take care of the mission. And so I do think that one of the things that I learned from that time period and being in basic training during 9/11 and kind of seeing the country come together over tragedy and from the military standpoint and added with all my deployments. Like not everybody liked me in the military, right? I served with people left and right that had different ideologies, different viewpoints, different politics, but we were connected by a unifying mission, a mission that we all want to make it back home, right? And like I kind of believe, like even in politics, if we can unify around things that we all agree upon, let's work on that, right? Let's agree upon that and keep that the main thing. And then I think a lot of the individualism, individualism doesn't move community. And so what I learned from that moment on 9/11 is that it took the whole community coming together, right? It took everybody coming together to be like, oh no, we need to do something about this, and we need to be there for the people that are directly impacted by this traumatic event, right? And so that's kind of the mindset that I took from that event, and then I recognized that it was real, and so I was prepared. I recognized when I raised my right hand that I was going to serve foreign and domestic and be willing to put my life on the line. I really, on that day, recognized what that meant.
Now, I also understand before a deployment to Afghanistan in 2011, so about 10 years after that, you were a defensive coach for a Hopewell, Virginia football team. And you learned some good mentorship lessons there. And the team ended up winning a championship. Shades of Minnesota Governor Walz there. So if you could tell me about that time and heck, the defense that you ran.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I always play intramural sports and things of that nature. And before Afghanistan, one of my soldiers in my unit, his son was on the Hopewell Blue Devils. It's like an intramural league, or if you will, right? Pop Warner, if you will. And so he was like, "Yeah, we need coaches." And I was single at the time, and I was like, "Hey, you know what? I want to get into it." And so he said, "We need somebody on defense." So I came out, um, and it was a good group of guys. One of them to this day, we're Facebook friends, Maurice Green. Um, uh, really poured into him. He went to Hopewell High School. He's a dad now. He's taking care of business, right? And really just seeing the elevation of him being on my defense, being one of those hard hitter, go getters, listeners. I mean, me pouring into them, right? Me being a black man, right? I didn't have any kids at the time, right? I was single. I had money in my pocket. I was doing what I was supposed to do, and I had a good head on my shoulders, and I was able to pour into them and try to keep them on the right path. I don't necessarily remember the defense that we were in. I just know we had a lot of good athletes, and that's what it takes, especially at that level. A lot of good athletes, and we were able to go win that championship, and that was one of the most unique things that I've done in my life because. Pouring into youth is a special thing, and when you see the light bulb go off, and I think that's what I teach now too, right? Because when you see the light bulb go off on in somebody else and they got it, they're going to carry that with them for the rest of their lives, and that's all we really can do. All we really can do is pour into each other, and then keep it moving and hoping that people take the best from what you're pouring into them.
To my understanding, you went through a relatively uncomfortable transition from military life into the private sector. So, if you don't mind sharing what happened, what did you observe that was wrong with the system, and how would a delegate like yourself help out?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's a few things that I noticed on my transition. Unfortunately, I was forced to medically retire because of my deployments and my PTSD. And when I went to seek help to really manage my mental health, because I like to be honest, I had a problem. I used to use drinking as a coping mechanism to kind of deal with the nightmares and the different things that I dealt with so that I could perform during the week. I was high functioning Army. Like I made Sergeant First Class in 10 years, right? And anybody that's in the military knows that's fast tracking. I thought I was going to be a Sergeant Major, but I recognized that my mental health and what I was doing to myself was more important than continue service in that realm, right? And so I was forced to medically retire because of my PTSD, and I began getting the mental health treatment that I needed. One of the things that I recognized when I was transitioning, though, was that it is difficult to transition. Like if you don't have a team or if you don't really know what you're supposed to be doing or what you're eligible for or what resources that you can have, and depending on where you're going to go, the resources look differently. And the military tries to prepare individuals to exit, but I don't know if it's human nature or the combination of how the resources are given. But sometimes people don't catch on until it's too late. And so I like to believe that I'm pretty astute, and I had difficulty transitioning. I had difficulty getting into resources and programming and things of that nature. And it was very frustrating for me. And I just imagine all the people that I served with, um, how like half of them won't even give it a try. And I still have battle buddies that still one of my old soldiers, and I was able to connect them with somebody, but one of my old soldiers reached out and said, "Hey, I need to fill out my claims. I haven't did it, and can you point me in the right direction?" And so one of the things I recognize is that as a state delegate, the Virginia Veteran Affairs is different than the federal, but I think Virginia Veteran Affairs, because Virginia is one of the largest military and veteran states across the country. So I think that we should lead with veteran resources, benefits, and ways to integrate them back into society, especially because we see at the federal level with the potential job cuts to the VA, which I get all my health care from the VA. So any cuts to the VA is going to impact me and my spouse tremendously because we're both retired veterans, and we use the VA as our sole source of health care. And so it's very important to us. Uh, and so when I look at all of that, I think as a delegate, I'll be able to help the governor, whoever it may be, strengthen the Virginia Veterans Affairs Department and really be that bridge because as the federal government looks to shrink, I believe that states need to take up the mantle and push us into the future. And so as a delegate, I want to lead with some of that innovation and be like, all right, I know we used to do things this way and we depended on the federal government this way, but let's put our heads together and be innovative to kind of take off that responsibility since we have an administration that doesn't want to do it.
I understand. I understand. Now, what I like to do here with SHSU, especially when I have on politically minded individuals such as yourself, when I ask questions based on the topics that they're running on, I might interject if I disagree slightly, my own view first. That way, I don't provide too much pushback or disrespect or anything like that. So, I want to switch now to some topics that you had on your website. Your very first priority is common sense gun legislation. So here's where I stick my mind out here on that issue. I think guns take lives, and I don't like guns outright, either in private ownership or the government. Now, while I'm worried about my neighbors having guns and shooting each other, which is actually something that happened early last year on our street, um, I'm also worried about cops. I'm worried about ICE. I'm worried about the National Guard. And here I get to thinking that the Second Amendment actually had a point and that John Brown, Malcolm X, and the Panthers were absolutely correct about gun ownership. So, thusly, I want to hear your thoughts on guns, maybe the Second Amendment, gun legislation. Where do you think it needs to go? What would you like to do as a delegate?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I can use a lot of the talking points, right? But as a person that served in the military and as a concealed carry license holder, um, I believe in the Second Amendment. I think that what we've allowed individuals to interpret it for their individual edification instead of for the intent, how it's supposed to be. And I also believe that legislators can strengthen things, right? When we notice crises or something's going on, we are supposed to step up to the plate and provide solutions and mitigations for the current climate that we're in. In my district, District 75, Gun violence is a thing, right? In Hopewell and Chester, all around, and for different reasons, right? And so there's not, I don't believe there's one fix, but I believe we need to come together as community, right? We need to be more in unity. And so, while I don't want to take away anybody's guns, I also don't think that individuals should have like military grade weapons in their garage, right? Like, I just don't see the place for it. In Iraq, my first deployment as a 22-year-old, I was not only was I the armor, so I'm familiar with all different calibers of weapons, right? From an M9 to a Mark 19 grenade launcher, and so I know firsthand the damage that a lot of these weapons can do. But I will say I heard your point, but I don't think guns take lives. People take lives. People take lives, and I think that we need to focus our resources on educating the people, providing preventions where we can. Right. So when you talk about red flag laws, and banning switches and different things, and potentially going after manufacturers that provide these things that can make a handgun a fully automatic, and all of those things. I think we need to put those type of legislative priorities in, but I really think it's going to take a combined effort from both public and private to kind of address the people taking people lives, right? And how do we kind of de-escalate, right? How do we come together and be able to voice our opinions and be able to walk away, and do more intervention type tactics, because I believe once we can get back to that point of being in community, then people won't take lives anymore.
Switching over now to what I think your second priority is, which regards reproductive rights, specifically coming from right wing attacks on the matter. And while I don't think Democrats are going to be against this here, I do want to point out many times national Democrats actually had power to institutionalize and enshrine Roe into the national code, but they didn't do that. And Republicans fought for what they believed for decades, either in the shadows and in the quiets. And as soon as Democrats were out of power and they nominated the right judges, now we're all playing catch up because they were united on the policy. So, what do you think your role could be in turning this all around?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this topic is, I think healthcare in essence is nuance, right? I think we have to understand a combination of things. When we talk about reproductive freedom, so I'm a dad. I have three daughters, and so uh, I'm raising them with strong beliefs and morals. But I also understand that um, once they turn 18, they have the autonomy to make their own choices, right? And so I like to couch this conversation staying there, that everybody, once they become an adult, should be able to make the choices that they need to make for their lives. And I also recognize, I grew up in church, I'm Kojic, but I also recognize that you cannot legislate morality, right? And so there's no amount of legislation that we'll be able to enact to get people to behave how we think they should behave. Legislation should provide the standard so that we all can thrive with opportunities within the system. And so I think one of the things that I'll bring to the table is kind of that approach to really seeing what we can agree upon, working on that, and then making it equitable for all parties. I think that everybody should have a voice and a choice, but that doesn't mean that your voice or your choice will go along with the masses either, right? And so it's kind of understanding those nuances and saying, like, what is best for the community the whole, when we the system that we have, the republic that we have, and that's why I love my foundation of understanding government, is like, yes, I want you to advocate for whatever you want to advocate for, and if I'm a supporter of that, I will participate in that. But once the decision is made, right, we got to go along with that until we get enough voices and enough power, enough community and unity to push something forward, right? And we've seen that across society in the last 20, 25 years, where we've been able to coalesce around certain topics and everything. I mean, passing what they like to call Obamacare, right? The Affordable Care Act it wasn't an easy thing to do, right? And so when we look at things like that, and I bring that up because also and just in the healthcare sense, right? In 2018, I was the senior legislative assistant for then Delegate Lashley's heir, who is now Senator Air. And during that legislative cycle, I assisted not only her in her office, right? I managed those affairs, but I assisted the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus in pooling and bringing together all their legislative priorities for that General Assembly cycle. We historically passed Medicaid expansion during that, right? In a split government at that, right? Because the Republicans controlled, I think, both houses, right? And we had a Democratic governor. And we were able to pass Medicaid expansion, and it took a lot of negotiations, right? But one of the things that people don't understand, where I think my candidacy now and something that I was there then and I can help fight for now, uh, is that there's a trigger clause in there, right? And so this trigger clause, if the threshold from the federal deposits into the system go down, then the trigger clause will begin to kick people off of Medicaid expansion. I think the number is like below 90%, right? And
And that's
so
what the big beautiful bill does.
100%. That's what the big beautiful bill does, right? And so a lot of people don't understand those nuances or even what that means, right? But when we look at um, inflation and prices, tariffs, and the cost of medication and the caps going away, and so when I have a senior population that needs their medication, I mean, heck, when we look at some of our community populations with our youth, a lot of our youth are on medications, right? Like my daughter has asthma, my son has allergies, right? So when we think about the whole gambit of healthcare and medication and the affordability of it all, I think we all have a piece in this puzzle that we play. And so I think that my understanding of being there to pass the first Medicaid expansion, but understand the Republicans, because this is who did it. The Republicans put that trigger clause in. And so now here we are all these years later where hundreds of thousands of people potentially will get kicked off in the fall and we'll have no recourse for that, right? But elect Stephen Miller Pitts. And then in January, we will make sure that we tie all of that back up, right? Without those type of trigger clauses that putting us in this turbulent time period with the shrinking of the federal government.
Now, my next question was going to be about the broader aspect of healthcare, but I think we already touched on that. So let's go ahead now to another priority of yours, which is education, specifically raising teacher pay and fully funding schools, which I think is an allusion to what some might say is the opposite of that, which is school choice. And we're running into heavy education pushback from the Republicans, state level, national level, like eliminating the Department of Education. How do you push back against their regressive nature on education?
Yeah, so I think this is another thing that the community really needs to get involved in. At the end of the month, I'll be stepping down from the Chesterfield County Public Schools Audit and Finance Committee. For the past 2 years, I served as the chair. And so that committee really is there to help the school board make decisions and evaluate and recommend things that deal with the finances, the budget, and the audits of the public school system, right? And so one of the things that we were able to do as citizen members was really push the school board to be more transparent and really kind of not only meet the standard but exceed the standard. And we put a lot of those things in place. And so, luckily, this cycle, Chesterfield County Public Schools has met their budget. Right, we have $1 billion operating budget. So I understand the intricacies, but then I also recognize that about $60 million worth of the Chesterfield County Public Schools, which is about 5% of the budget, comes from federal dollars, right? And a lot of the programs that they pay for are programs for the least of the students, the ones that need more resources or more engagement, right? Our ESL, our English as second language individuals, right? All of those different components. Our students with intellectual disabilities. Sometimes they need more support and resources like nurses and things of that nature in the school system, and a lot of that funding is targeted to be cut. And so I think that because I have that unique knowledge of it, I want to push the General Assembly to really invest in our schools, and I think individuals need to. You know, sometimes you hear out there people be like, "I don't have no kids. I don't care about the schools." This, but then, you know, like I said, the teacher in me make it relatable. Well, when you go to get your oil change, the individuals there had some type of training, right? Technical training, whatever it may be. Chesterfield County has two technical schools, right? There's a lot of different things where the investment into the youth, right, will make better citizens and resources for us to enjoy, right? When you go to the grocery store, right? You want to have good engagement, right? But when you go to the medical doctor, you want the receptionist to be engaging, right? Uh, the individuals that potentially will take care of your parents, senior care, right? These are individuals that are coming out of the school system. So if we don't have a good stock of educated and well-resourced youth, then a lot of the amenities that we appreciate will deteriorate, and that's what we kind of see. And then we wonder why. And it's like, well, we just invest in schools, we can kind of catch them there, right? So then when they matriculate into adulthood, they kind of help meet the needs of where we are, right? And so those are kind of some of the components how I see the school system, but really also I'm big on private public partnerships, right? So like Microsoft, like we got the kids got the Chromebooks. I think it looked like my daughter and I had the same Chromebook for like the last 4 years, right? Those things are on life cycle, right? Are we being innovative with everything that we're trying to teach these scholars and students, like with AI on the rise and getting them ready for the workforce, wherever may and whatever, however it may look? Are we working with private institutions to come into the schools to kind of create like the lab? So everything that the governor and certain people want to do with allowing school choice, right? With privatize and everything, uh, those type of educational institutions have these different things that tie into the curriculum that I think we need to bring to the public schools. And if we can find a way to do that, then like my grandma used to say, we'd be cooking with fish grease.
Um, I also I think there could be many good ideas for education that come both from the Democrats and the Republicans, and I don't necessarily want to see good ideas partially quashed by party identity. And what comes to mind, of course, is I know of a recent a bill attempt called Celeste Law from Republican AC Cardoza on the peninsula, who proposed a bill to try to get school resource officers to be able to um, patrol the bathrooms to make sure every 30 minutes or so there's no bullying or anything going on in the bathrooms. But the bill was quashed sort of on a party line vote. And that is something I think that might be good, is to make sure that good ideas, even if they come from left or right, aren't quashed on a party level. But, you know, it's Virginia politics. I understand you have worked in right there in the General Assembly as a legislative aide. So I think you know how the process works sometimes. But yeah, I still would like to see some good stuff pass, even if it comes from side you wouldn't expect. So,
Yeah,
um,
100%. I agree with that. I think that, and you know, I'm a Democrat through and through. I've been voting Democrat since I've been able to vote John Kerry back in '04, right? And so, but even with that, I believe in the best ideas. The best ideas is what moves society. Because at the end of the day, when I become the delegate from District 75, I have a responsibility to represent all people, not just the people that voted for me, right? And so when you look at that, you have to really put yourself to a side and say, okay, this is what best. This was best for the majority of people. And then your constituent services, which I'm really big on, and that's another reason why I'm running, because the incumbent doesn't have good constituent services, right? And so even with that, when you have these individual cases, that's when your constituent services can help the individual person with whatever their needs are, right? And I think that's really the model that our legislators should take instead of, showing up to everybody else's event and hopping in the pictures.
I also believe that high costs have been on our minds for many years, especially with this inflation. And Dominion Energy sort of has a chokehold on Virginia politics, and they control a lot of our utilities here. So I think Virginia government can go after bringing costs down, and utilities and such need to come down. What would you wish to do as a delegate regarding high costs and utilities and that for Virginians?
Yeah, absolutely. This definitely needs to be addressed. I think that the uniqueness. I just was at a community event yesterday. Chesterfield County, Dominion wants to build a gas plant, and I'm a member of the Chesterfield County NAACP, and our stance is that where they want to build a gas plant, it's not good. The methane gas is not good. They're putting in black and brown communities, and they have a plan they can get it done in Chesterfield County to do five more, I believe, across the Commonwealth. And so we're kind of like the guinea pig to see if they can ram the gas plant down. And the location that it is in the Black and Brown community. And one of the things that my illustrious president Nicole Martin said to them was when they met was, well, why don't you put it in short pump? Those individuals make a higher median income and they can use the data centers and the power. And Dominion was like, they kind of scoffed at that, right? Because we understand demographics, the individual plays a role in where corporations put things that may not be good for the environment or the people, right? That's just what goes along with it. I think that there's a uniqueness though, because if you watch some of the going ons, there's candidates that, Dominion gives money on both sides of the aisle. Clean Virginia gives money on both sides of the aisle. And they're kind of like, uh, they go against each other, right? And so it's kind of like, I want the people to return the power back to the people and to allow legislators to make the best decisions for the people that they serve. And it's difficult to do that when you have corporations that spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? That we understand, especially comes from people paying their energy bills, right? Like the money. So if Dominion was in a different thing, then you could be like, oh, okay, well, maybe the money comes from profits, but the profits are from people paying the energy that they need. And then it's just going to raise energy costs even more. And so there's got to be a different model and a methodology to that. But I believe that we need the right people at the table and in the room negotiating, right, with these individuals to hold their feet to the fire. And at some aspect, we kind of need to get big money out of politics because if you're donating $1 million to my campaign, it's hard for me to tell you no.
Yeah, I mean, look what Musk just said to Trump, that I effectively made you president by dropping $300 million on his campaign, even though Musk seems to be weirdly coming back around to support him. But again, that's money in politics. It's big and it leads to too many strings attached. And I think that you feel the same. So I appreciate that viewpoint. So now, Mr. Miller Pitts, how may Chesu viewers learn more about yourself and follow yourself before Tuesday and possibly after Tuesday?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity. I can be you can find everything from me. My website is millipits, the number 4va.com. And all of my socials are at millipits 4va. I'm on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. I think I'm even on TikTok. And I'm on X actually. And one of the things, I'm not going anywhere, right? So I pray. I'm a faith driven individual, so I'm praying that God is on my side. And with that being said, God will touch the hearts of people to go cast a ballot for me on Tuesday. Uh, but the work continues regardless come June 18th. Because there's so much going on in society, so many kitchen table issues, livable wages, affordable housing, affordable health care, safe communities, gun prevention, reproductive freedom. Will our youth have a society that they recognize and be able to enter with the full rights and liberties that I teach from, right? And so just know that Stephen Miller Pitts is down for the fight. I've lived a life of service. When I was on the mountains of Afghanistan begging God to please let me come home, and he did that, I decided that I was going to fight for the people until I took my last breath. And so that's what I choose to do. Hopefully, prayerfully, is as the next delegate of District 75. But if not, I will still be out here doing the work for the people.
That does sound very excellent. Very excellent for you. And my last thing was going to be to have you give a very good last elevator pitch, but I think that sounded very much like the great pitch for why Stephen Miller Pitts should be voted for on Tuesday and possibly come November when the general election comes around. So I do, of course, want to thank you, Mr. Stephen Miller Pitts, for joining Shez Who today and just talking about running and why you like politics.
Thanks, Shez. I appreciate the opportunity. God bless you, and I appreciate you, and I'll see you around, sir. Look forward to meeting you in person.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Possibly when the next NASCAR race comes to the Richmond area.
I should be there. The NAACP, we like to volunteer. I did it last year, so it was a blast.
August, I think, is when the next one is. And thank you, of course, for not only enjoying NASCAR, but coming on Shez Who, and definitely would like to meet you sometime in the future. Have a great day, good sir.
You too.
All right. Thank you, Shez Who viewers, for not only watching today, this morning time edition. As you know, Shez Who is your top spot for politics. And we just learned about Stephen Miller Pitts running in Virginia's 75th District's Democrat primary. We thank him for coming on the show. Don't forget to like our content, subscribe to the Shez Who channel, keep your political interest high as we get ready to go into November with this great political tide coming in Virginia.